Everybody. Welcome to the May 4th, 2020 meeting of the Stillwater City Council. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Up first on the agenda is the consent docket. We have 3 items, all being minutes of our prior meetings. Councilors, is there a question or a motion on the consent docket?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion from the Vice Mayor and a second from Councilor Zanotti. Teresa, could you call the roll, please?
Mayor Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. Next up is public comment on items not scheduled for public hearings. We do have a speaker sign up tonight. Just to remind everybody that there is a 3-minute time limit on speakers in this section of the meeting. And we are happy to welcome Mr. Riley Flack to the meeting tonight. Thanks for being here, Riley. Take it away.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate the time. I know many of you have probably read some difficult comments to read from me. And I just want to first acknowledge that you guys all up there, you guys are valuable beyond the ideas you espouse and the policies that you prescribe. You have intrinsic value that goes beyond what I say or anybody else says. And so I appreciate you guys on a human level more than a Facebook comment can afford me. With that said, it's also been difficult to read the things that have been stated by you, Mr. Joyce, the city manager, and surely helped be written by Mr. Dorman. Flippantly, I think I saw Will said, no law or court supports this view, quote. I think talking about the mask mandate being unconstitutional. Let me ask you a question. Does the Constitution need a law or a court to validate it? Or is it subservient to the Constitution? See, this is an easy question. Anybody, Constitution 101 can figure this out. And so when it's so flippantly thrown aside, the rights of the freedoms of Americans that are inalienable. You see, these rights are protected via the Constitution from you. You don't grant us these freedoms. You see, I understand the difficult nature with which these prescriptions have been written, and I understand that they weren't done lightly, and I don't question the motives of you folks. I know, being fellow citizens of Stillwater, that you guys want the best for Stillwater. It just seems to me that lack of principle is a problem, and seeing, especially with new data coming out, not models, but actual statistics that are showing that this virus is way more prevalent, and there's way more asymptomatic people than previously shown in models, and that has been unaddressed. And these measures, they're not being updated to reflect current data. They're still being held. The models are still being used, and I would just appreciate a little more consideration for my rights as an American. People come from all over the world to taste the freedom of America, and the freedom is enshrined in our Constitution, and it's inalienable rights that we have, that people all over the world desire to have. And I would just appreciate more discussion with respect to the rights of the citizens that you seemingly have flippantly disregarded, and I don't appreciate it. And I think you guys ought to be ashamed of the way that you have not even spoken a word. You've dismissed the idea that this could be unconstitutional. And pardon me, sir, I don't think so.
I appreciate that, Riley. I appreciate the commentary and appreciate you being here on the meeting tonight. thanks for your comment.
Thank you.
We will move now to item 5 on the agenda. Will be a report from Mr. McNichol on the Stillwater Area Sports Association regarding funding and potential dates for getting sports back going in Stillwater. You're muted, sir.
Still not used to this.
There you are.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Several weeks ago, we set out in looking at the budget and the potential effect to our revenues based on the lockdown and the businesses being closed and revenue perhaps shrinking. We started having discussions with our P3s, every one of them, and we asked them several questions. We still believe that it will be July and perhaps early August before we know exactly what our revenue position is going to be. And so we have asked them all to provide an estimate of needs because all of their contracts expire on June 30th, what they might need to get by beginning July 1 and through September, possibility of September 1, earlier if we can get those predictions in. We have been told by all of them, with the exception of the Sports Association, SASA, that they can survive till September 1 when we make that decision and that we can have that ongoing discussion then. SASA reports that they have received the entirety of their contract stipend for this year, but they had the misfortune of not being able to have tournaments and other revenue producing games for them since November. And they have presented us with estimate of $26,000 that they would need on July 1 to make it to September 1 because of salaries and other ongoing needs. And as we discussed in the golf contract, taking care of the fields. So it is our intent to bring that back to you no later than June 1 so that payment can be made. Staff wanted to make sure before we brought back the interim contracts that was along the lines of what the council wanted to see, or if there was other data that the council wanted to see. Also had long discussions with Carolyn Walstead about opening dates and when that might be. And she realizes that all depends on the virus, and that there's some dark target dates that we're looking at for perhaps opening fields to practice and then opening fields to games, and then at some other point opening fields to tournaments. We've given some target dates for that, and they're more than satisfied with that and are ready to push on and see what happens as time passes.
Thank you, Norman. Councilors, any questions on that matter?
I don't have a question, but I would just like to clarify P3s for the people who are listening. P3s are public-private partnerships, and we have several in the city. Lake McMurtry, Norman, do you want to name them?
Lake McMurtry, the Sherrar Center, Payne County Youth Services, the golf course. I mean, a lease with the golf course, lease the pool with YMCA that we will not be doing this year. I want to reiterate, the pool won't be open. Who am I missing? I'm sure I'm missing one.
Prairie Arts Center.
Oh, Prairie Arts Center. And right.
And yeah. And then other contracts we have with folks like the Chamber of Commerce and
Visit Stillwater that will be on later in the economic development meeting.
Yeah, I think that's important just to note that the number of sort of external or private nonprofits that are engaged in helping us provide services around the city, and that this time of difficulty, as we'll see in our budget, hopefully in a clearer picture here in the next couple of months, is unfortunately going to affect what we can do with them as well. So, we're appreciate the conversations that you're having, and appreciate those groups for figuring out, how they can help weather the storm with us. I have spoken with folks at TASA as well, and very appreciative of the work they're doing. I know they had expenditures already to get fields, prepped, and after the flooding last year, they had extra expenditures to get things back in shape. And so it is very tough, for them with potentially leagues, depending on what happens with leagues, and then tournaments that are part of their revenue strategy. And so we certainly want to keep them going, and keep, have them be able to maintain the stuff that they do maintain, and be ready to go as soon as as soon as the climate is safe for resumption of some of those activities. So appreciate the work that you guys are doing there too.
Well, thank you. And we certainly want them all to survive. They can do this job better than we can, and probably less expensive. So we want to encourage them to hang in there, and we'll get back to them as soon as we possibly can.
Norman, as it relates to SASA and fields and things opening, so the city manager's office has been working with them to kind of realistically set some guidance or boundary. I'm getting a lot of questions about this personally. So
yes, we've looked at a tentative date of May 15th to open fields for practice, June 1 for games, and I believe I should have brought that information with me. I believe maybe the 15th of June for tournaments, but those are all very flexible dates based on what happens over the next few weeks with the coronavirus and whether or not we have a surge.
can you explain a little bit, while we're talking about public-private partnerships, like how SASA works with us in terms of, so they maintain our fields, but they're city-owned, just a little bit about, I'm wondering, as we open, are those, there's city facilities, right? So that's something we need to be mindful of from our perspective.
Yes, they are city facilities, and they do, in the various contracts, there are a variety of requirements in terms of taking care of those facilities. And they do mow the fields, they do the dirt work, they do level the fields, they mark them. They do everything that the city used to do. We do the larger areas around them, but that fine work inside of those fields is done by TASA. And most of our partnerships deal with some form or another of city-owned property, other than a few of the contracts, the Chamber, Visit Stillwater, Pink County Youth Services, the Sherrar Center. Prairie Arts, we have a contract with them, and we own the building. We pay a certain amount of gas bill every year, up to a certain limit, and they otherwise take care of the building. So those are some examples of the kind of partnerships that we have. And again, I'm convinced that they can do it cheaper than the city can. So again, we want them to survive.
Absolutely.
So at this point, Norman, the plan is to bring those interim contracts back at a later meeting to finalize the plan there?
Yeah, 1st of June, yes.
Okay.
And we will be, I have talked to Ms. Reams. We will be recommending that $26,000 interim payment to SASA when you get that report.
Okay. Councilors, anything further on this item? All right, we'll move on to item 5B, which is Mr. Chris Knight here to talk to us about the use of city-owned property adjacent to Wittenberg Park along Highway 177 as a recycling staging facility. Mr. Knight.
Good evening, Chris Knight, Waste Management Director. I'm sure everyone can remember that the Recycling Task Force came in front of the council on February 24th and with a presentation, and that night the council approved to pursue the possibility to build a recycling staging facility. The first step was to locate some the property for the facility, and we've found the property. It's city-owned property, which is located out by Wittenberg Park. There should have been a map in the packet for you to view. It's approximately 5 acres, and like I said, the city owns it. And I am here tonight asking to use that property for the possibility of building a recycling staging facility. I'm not asking for any commitments to spend any money of any kind, just to the approval to pursue that property to possibility and start laying the groundwork. And we still have a lot to do. If you approve that, we'd like to develop a master plan, of course, what the exact cost is going to be, and with everything that we do, I'll come back in front of the council for approval to move forward. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Chris. Councilors?
Chris, I meant to go back and zoom out farther on this property to kind of see what else is. It's hard sometimes when you have a snippet there. So can you just give us kind of a surround of what's around this area?
Well, to the west, on some other side of some trees, there is the Wittenberg Lake. And then back to the southwest is the ballparks, the Wittenberg ballparks. There, of course, to the east across Washington is the golf course. And that's about everything around it.
Yeah, I think most people are familiar with Wittenberg Park. I just was trying to give some frame of reference.
Right, yeah, you got the Wittenberg Park to the south west, and then directly to the west is the Wittenberg Lake, and then directly to the east is the golf course.
What is directly to the south?
To the southwest is the Wittenberg Park, the ballparks. And then on down south, there's that convenience store. I'm trying to remember if that funeral home's to the south or to the north, but there's a funeral home. It's either to the south or the north.
To the south, yeah.
Yeah, to the south.
And it looks like I'm not sure if it's residential property or there's a few businesses farther north along Washington from there. Chris, what other, in terms of options here, I don't know, I feel like I recall from that prior conversation that we were looking for closer to 10 acres. Is this site big enough, one? And then were there any other sites that, is this kind of the only option considering what we currently own?
Well, yes, you're correct. We were talking about 10 acres initially. After doing some more investigation after the task force presentation and visiting with a few people, that our thought process was that we needed 10 acres, so maybe in the future we could expand to potentially a MRF or a transfer station. The MRF, if we were to do a MRF in the future, this facility is basically a MRF minus the equipment, the separating equipment for the recyclables. So really my thought process was, if we build this staging facility and in the future, there was a desire for a MRF, we could use the same facility and just have to add the sorting equipment to the building, which reduces on the amount of acres we really needed.
Okay.
And then as far as another location, the only other, we recently just found out that there could be a possibility. We've been trying to get approval for some city-owned property next to the waste management facility out by the airport. We submitted a design for approval by the FAA probably, I think it was in August. And we recently, about a week ago, they finally got back with us, and they gave us initial approval, but we have to do a full design and submit it again they're worried, they just want to make sure that the height restrictions are okay. And then they would give a final approval or a not approval, which the height won't be an issue. However, we will have to spend some money and do a full design to get that approval.
Okay. Well, I will just jump in and say, I think, I certainly have a couple of concerns about the location, given that it's next to a park, it's next to a lake. I'd just be, we would be very concerned about what the impact would be like, for folks who are using those facilities. If it's how enclosed this would be, the design of it would really be pretty important. It's also, sort of on a major thoroughfare into the city, right? Folks coming in from Tulsa on the Turnpike generally are coming straight down Washington there. We'd want to make sure that it wasn't something that people found to be an eyesore or for lack of a better analogy, back when we used to have a pig farm on the 51 coming in. We don't want to, something that might be either smell or sight that we don't want, visitors coming into town to see. But I'm sure all that stuff you guys are considering and we'll be talking about in terms of design, and that would all be very important. From my standpoint, being across from the golf course and kind of where it is, there's a lot of, I think, concern about how it would affect surrounding uses. So it certainly would have to talk a lot about that, depending on what the design and everything looks like here.
Well, absolutely, and I would bring everything, back to the council for approval. We would do a kind of a mock layout draft of it internally, and so you can kind of see what it would look like and bring you more information.
Would part of that be looking at transportation? That was one of my thoughts too. Well, not just kind of the visuals and aesthetics of it, but also if we have large trucks coming in and out of that facility onto that road. I don't know what the ingress or egress would be there, but could be problematic potentially too.
Yeah, it's a 4-lane road with no turn lanes, and I don't think much of a shoulder there either. So, having trucks coming in and out could potentially be a traffic issue that we'd have to deal with.
Well, there's already a challenge a little bit farther north too on that road. So I, would really want to be careful about the design and looking at all of those things.
Chris, is the property by the airport the same size?
It is actually a little bit bigger. I think it's probably around 7 acres, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. And it would have access from Airport Road or?
Airport Road, yes. And then if that road project ever happens out there on the access road, it wouldn't hamper it at all as far as access to the facility.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in terms of asking for approval to use the site tonight, I don't know. I'm not sure if that needs to happen right now, or if we can just say, let's see what plans might look like before we do that. I guess I'm not sure what the effect of saying, we approve the use of this land for that site would be right now, and whether that's necessary at this point in the process or not. Certainly be interested in seeing it, seeing what you could do with it, but I don't.
Okay.
I think if I could jump in there, that would give us 2 options to present a design. We can also ask our engineering folks to do a traffic study, and that gives us an option of 2 places. We were frankly concerned that we would not hear back from the FAA and started looking for other locations, and fortunately we have. So it would give us the opportunity to lay out a facility on both sites and have our engineering folks do a traffic study and see which is the most advantageous.
Is this something where is this all in-house work right now, Chris? Or are you having at this point, like if you're starting to do a layout and design, are you actually having to get outside services?
No, we believe we can be able to do the most of it internally, to kind of give you a layout and kind of a design picture of what it would kind of look like, what it would look like outside, how we're going to access the facility, just kind of give you a general idea of what it's going to look like. I think we can do that internally.
Yeah, it seems like too, there on either site, and obviously you've checked in with FAA, but either site there would be stakeholders that would need to be talked with too.
Right, correct. I mean, there's a lot to do. We're just trying to find a place that we can start working on it, and then come back to the council with a design, so you can just kind of see what it's going to look like, and then if there's anyone around that's against the facility being built there.
Well, it's just always, I don't want to presume that people would be against it, but it's just nicer when people can see actually what you're planning. And I'm so excited that you found property that we already own. And it seems like a kind of a great opportunity to compare the two pieces of property and look at the advantages and disadvantages of both. So I look forward to seeing that in the future, and happy also that you can do that internally.
Thank you.
So would we need a motion to approve the site, or do we just need to direct staff to go ahead and do those preliminary plans at this point? I mean, what's actually needed for you guys to be able to step forward with kind of fleshing all that out?
I think you could just tell us that you are happy to look at both options, and we can go from there.
That seems like a reasonable direction to take at this point. So, okay. Councilors, any other questions or comments on that item? Okay. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate it. Appreciate the work in trying to figure out where to put that thing.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. That takes us down to item 5C. This is authorize an application for 2020 Emergency Solutions Grant on behalf of the Mission of Hope, and authorize the mayor to sign grant documents. Cindy Gibson, good evening.
Good evening. Cindy Gibson, Manager of Administrative Services for the City of Stillwater. Before you this evening is a request for the Mission of Hope. They are seeking approval to apply for the 2020 Emergency Solutions Grant. It's formerly been referred to as Emergency Shelter Grant, or the ESG grant. This grant is in the amount of $50,000. This grant helps them provide administrative services, emergency shelter services, outreach and preventative programs, as well as rapid rehousing for homeless. The reason they're before you this evening, it is required for them to seek approval from the local jurisdiction in order to apply. The city's been assisting with this grant for over 15 years now. There will be no financial impact to the city's budget. Staff recommends council authorize the Mission of Hope to apply for this grant, and authorize the mayor to sign the documents as needed. And any questions?
Thank you, Cindy. Councilors, any questions?
No.
Thank you.
We like these kinds of decisions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not much to this one. Norman, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but just off the top of my head, I know with some of the new federal stimulus money that might be available from a grant perspective, hopefully, the Mission of Hope, maybe somebody that might be able to use some of that, because I know from a COVID response standpoint, that's part of what that money's designed for, and they've been full, as far as I know, and very busy trying to help care for the homeless population, or people who are experiencing homelessness here in Stillwater. So hopefully we're also looking into additional grants they may be able to see from the COVID response.
Well, as I'm a volunteer on that board, I will tell you that I know for a fact that they are looking into that. So
good.
And always are. It's an expensive place to run. They do a great job, and we're again happy to have their partnership with the city of Stillwater to deal with the homeless issues here.
Absolutely. Councilors, anything further on this, or is there a motion?
Motion. Oh, go ahead, John. Go ahead. Motion to authorize this application. We're going to get it done together for the 2020 Emergency Solutions Grant on behalf of the Mission of Hope, and authorize the mayor to sign the grant.
What a fantastic motion. I will second that motion.
We have a motion from Councilor Jaloski and a second from Councilor Wedlake. Teresa, can you call the roll, please?
Mayor Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington,
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake,
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that item is approved. Thank you, Cindy. Okay, that takes us to item 5D on the agenda, which is our COVID-19 update. Well, it was a quiet weekend in Stillwater from a COVID-19 standpoint, but not really at all. Just not to belabor this point, that's been discussed quite a bit in the media and all over the place. We did have businesses reopen here on Friday in accordance with the governor's order. I think, from what I heard, on many fronts, that went well. I know a lot of businesses decided to reopen using the rules that are in place, both from the state and here from the city of Stillwater. We did have some concern around the enforcement of people wearing masks in stores, and just the store employees that were having to deal with folks who didn't really want to wear those masks. And unfortunately, there was some unpleasant encounters, I think, with those store employees and folks that called up the city and some of those store managers and just said, hey, we're not really comfortable with this. At that point on Friday afternoon, we did decide to modify the order slightly to not require those stores to enforce that, so that we weren't putting those employees kind of on the front line. We've talked a little here before about masks and mask orders, and whether that's something we practically can enforce citywide with our police force, and that, in prior discussion I think we've had, it's a difficult issue, and certainly a difficult from a resource standpoint to try to do that. And so that modified order really, I think, just was to try to help keep those store employees from being involved in unpleasant situations with customers. There was quite a reaction to that modification. Lots of people interpreted it lots of different ways. Got quite a bit of feedback. Spent some time on news programs this weekend. Really pretty unfortunate. I think the most unfortunate thing about it, in terms of the coverage for me, was just I think a somewhat skewed view of our town, in terms of people talking about ugliness and things that were happening here. I think portrayed on a much more widespread level and a much more problematic level than really what was our concern, which was store employees just not having to deal with angry patrons, and that's really what sort of prompted that. And so wanted to make sure people understood that the community of Stillwater has been very positive in its response to everything that we've been doing over the last 6 to 8 weeks. We've had folks who are very concerned about keeping their neighbors safe as well. We've had widespread compliance and no problems really with our stay-at-home order while it was in place. And so, I was disappointed, I think, some places to see Stillwater portrayed as some sort of lawless Wild West town, which I don't think was the case. But we also did want to just make sure that we weren't creating problems for folks at stores. But so going forward, we'll keep we have this order in place. In modifying it on Friday, we also did go ahead and extend it out till the end of May, just to make it those transitions a little bit easier, to not create those deadlines necessarily. If we feel like they need to go longer, we can. If we need to modify it sooner, we can. So that'll be in place, for at least the next couple of weeks as the state's phase 1 is sort of proceeds, and we sort of see what the numbers look like. And we will, like we said, reevaluate and sort of see if phase 2 is next, or if we need to extend these current orders out, or if we need to take a step backwards. I think that was another question I got a lot this weekend was, well, now, you're not going to, if people object to having to take a step backwards, are you going to not do that too? And I think that's an emphatic know, if the numbers indicate that we need to, go back to a more strict social distancing guidelines here in the city, we will certainly do that. We, like I said before, the city was very helpful and cooperative in helping, and I think the vast majority of our community understands the need to keep each other safe, and so we will take those steps if we need to in the future. I also just briefly address Mr. Flack's comments from earlier because they do pertain to this item. I certainly don't mean to be flippant about anybody's constitutional rights. I am an attorney, a licensed attorney. I'm as a member of this council swore to uphold the Constitution as well. I take that very seriously. I think we all do. I know we all do. My comments about mask orders is that the Constitution certainly doesn't mention anything about face coverings, especially in the time of a pandemic. And so it is a law or a potential law that would have to be interpreted by the courts. And the way our judicial system works is to figure out, is that a law that violates a portion of the Constitution or not? And my comment is that I haven't seen anything from a court, certainly not the Supreme Court, that would say that it does. Several states and cities have these in place already. And so to my knowledge, there is not a court ruling or a law out there that would say a city is not allowed to make that rule. That was the point of my comment. Certainly was not intended to be flippant about people's constitutional rights, and I think we all again want to maintain those to the extent we can. But everything we do here, we have to weigh. Certainly at this time, we have to weigh the safety of our community against all those other considerations as well. So we will continue to do that, and we'll continue to do it as conservatively and as in terms of we're not just going out and trying to make as many rules as we can. We're trying to make the rules that we need. We're trying to set the guidelines that we need to set to make sure that we're treating this pandemic with the caution and the concern that it definitely deserves. So that's the extent of my update on COVID-19 at this point. Councilors, would love to hear your comments or thoughts or any questions that you all have about the issue.
I don't have a lot to say aside from the fact I wanted to clear up maybe some confusion about the efficacy or how well masks work in the prevention or the spread of COVID-19. The quick and short answer is we honestly don't know. That number, the reduction in spread of virus is really uncertain at this point. We know that masks help prevent spread of similar viruses, and so the thinking has kind of been extrapolated from what we know about other viruses. Granted, there is some assumption in doing that. This virus hasn't been around long enough that we actually have hard data to study what the spread is like with versus without a mask. So I just say that because there's been a lot of stuff going around Facebook and certainly a lot of emails and comments that I've received regarding what these masks are actually doing. And the truth of the matter is we honestly don't know as it pertains to COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 directly. But with that said, we know based on data regarding similar viruses that masks are effective at preventing community spread. So that data, granted, is somewhat extrapolated, but thinking logically, it would seem to make sense that it's protective for COVID-19 as well. So I mention that because anybody that tells you that they know for sure is wrong. Nobody knows. The other point of confusion, I think, surrounding recommendations for masks stems from the fact that the World Health Organization, the WHO, has not formally recommended masks for people that are not experiencing respiratory symptoms. However, the United States Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, actually has recommended cloth coverings for those patients that even may be asymptomatic. So the CDC's wording on that actually is that in situations where social distancing, to be defined as 6 feet of distance or greater between two people, if that is not feasible, then it is recommended that cloth coverings be used. They are very careful to choose their words because they do not recommend medical grade masks be worn by those who are asymptomatic. That recommendation comes because of the mask shortage and medical grade masks hopefully being reserved for those in the medical community who are on the front lines of this. But let me be very clear that the CDC's recommendation is to wear a face covering in those situations where social distancing is not feasible. So I know that there's a lot of, you kind of have to parse through all of that because the wordings are difficult and you have different recommendations from different governing bodies. But the long and short of it is the CDC actually is recommending cloth coverings for all people where social distancing is not cannot be attained. So I just wanted to clear that up because I got a lot of comments about that this weekend, and a lot of people mistakenly believing that there is no recommendation for masks in any way. That is simply not true.
Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate the fact that we have a medical doctor on the council at this point in our history, and I appreciate your thorough analysis of that. I think for me, I mean, where you're going to get that at the end of that, and the CDC recommends it, the State Department of Health recommends it. I didn't go to medical school, so I'm not going to try to parse through the data on whether it's effective or not. But from our standpoint, they're certainly recommended by like you said, they're recommended by the CDC, by our state health department. Certainly seems like a reasonable thing for us to continue to strongly recommend for everyone in Stillwater when you're close to other people, when you can't maintain, or if you potentially can't maintain, right? I mean, you might think you can maintain that distance when you're going out to Walmart or going somewhere, but other people walk up to you without you asking them to, right? So even if you think you may not be able to, it's definitely the recommendation of the health professionals, the public health agencies that we look to. So thank you for that, Dr. Wedlake. Councilors?
Mayor, I just wanted to tell you that I have appreciated your leadership. I want the public to know that you have definitely borne the brunt of decisions that have been made, but I also want the public to know that you've had full support of all of us in doing so, and the city staff have done an amazing job in trying to sift through all that and figure out what the best decision is. And so I just wanted to publicly thank you for what you've done for the city of Stillwater, and that the public needs to know that we are in full support of the way you've handled it and what you've done so far. So thank you.
Appreciate that. And you guys, I mean, we had a good long discussion about this last week, and I think we are I hope people understand that I'm not just out there by myself trying to make all this happen. I mean, I appreciate the support you guys have had and the discussions that we've been able to have in our meetings about these issues. So appreciate that. Pat, you're muted.
Take another direction here, although I do want to second what Elaine said. Really appreciate your work, Will, and also appreciate your family's sacrifice of your time. I think this has been going on a long time, and people are getting a little bit edgy, we may have noticed. And I would just want to say again, if you're having any concerns about yourself or other people in your family or your neighborhood who seem to be overly affected by this great period of grief and uncertainty, and are in a mental health situation, please do not hesitate to get help for them or to encourage them to get help. There are lots of resources, national crisis lines, national suicide line, and we have local crisis lines. Those numbers are on the Stillwater Public Library website. And you don't have to make diagnoses yourself. Just call a line and get some help.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. That is, yeah, absolutely needed. And those resources are, like you said, available. And I appreciate what you said about, each other, watching out for each other, right? Because sometimes it's hard to recognize ourselves, that we're kind of getting into a funk or starting to be a bit bothered. So when we notice that in our family and our friends and the folks that we do interact with, it's, don't be afraid to bring it up. Ask them
Absolutely.
if they're doing okay.
Absolutely. It's kind of a myth that if you bring up a question to somebody, are you thinking about hurting yourself or killing yourself, that you're going to plant the idea in their mind, and it is absolutely not true. It's usually a relief to have someone actually speak out loud their concern and what they're concerned about.
Thank you.
Mayor, I just had one thought as we move through this phase. Prior to moving into this phase, we had talked with different sectors and different groups in our community, the business community, the faith organizations, and different stakeholders within our community. I was thinking this morning that we should plan another one prior to next phase opening, or just prior to kind of that target date that we now have in the proclamation, as a way to check in to see how people are doing, to see how this round of opening has gone and any of the challenges that they may have faced, any of the planning that they're doing. I found that personally, Vice Mayor Darlington and I spoke with the nonprofits and the churches, and I found that I think that those entities really appreciated having the opportunity to talk with us. And I think it'd be great to hear from them, just so that we can make sure that we're preparing in a way that gives them the best possible chance to safely reopen and continue down this path. I think, nobody wants to stall right now. Nobody wants to go backwards. And just, I think the responsibility to do this safely is on us, but also our whole community. So engaging those stakeholders, I think, would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea, and we should we can certainly reach out and start to set some of those conversations up. I would also just add that for anybody in the community, business owner, nonprofit, church, anybody who's got questions or wants to provide some input, feels like they let us know how things are going, at your store. Please feel free to reach out to any of the counselors, myself, and kind of give us that input. We do, we need to know what's kind of going on at that level, because these decisions are, that's where they affect, first. And so, whether it's an individual or business or whatever the entity is in town, we'll reach back out to set up some more of those conversations for sure. But anybody who has a concern or a question or just wants to let us know how it's going, in their piece of the world, please do, because it is very helpful for us to, like you said, it's very helpful to have those conversations. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Okay, anything further on the COVID issue tonight? I will just add, Pat, just because you mentioned my family, my son, I'm sure, is not sitting watching this meeting tonight, but it's his 15th birthday. So happy birthday to him, and can't wait to get home and have some cake. All right, that takes us to the end of the City Council agenda. Is there any reports from officers and boards? Mr. Dorman?
Nothing to report, sir.
Mr. McNichol?
No, sir. Thank you.
Councilors? I should, I guess, just because we talked about the census at this point in our meeting for so long, I will report quite sadly that we did not beat Norman in our self-response challenge. Mayor Clark has not yet sent me a hat that I have to wear, but you'll see that coming up at a meeting in the future. I think we did very well. We finished the month of April above 50% self-response. We started in the low 40s when it may have been the high 30s at the time we started. So we certainly did see good response, and I think the main message at this point is that you can still respond. If you have not responded to the census yet, it is still open. You can still respond online, my2020census.gov. It's easy. It does not take very long. Again, all this discussion about finances and how money is distributed from your taxes that go to Washington and then hopefully make it back here. All of that matters. The census really matters to all of that. So please, if you have not taken a chance yet to respond to the census, please do so. It's too late to save me from having to wear what I assume will be an OU hat, but it is not too late to help your community and make sure that everyone here is counted. So please respond to the census. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion from the Vice Mayor and a second from Councilor Wedlake to adjourn the City Council meeting. Teresa, can you call the roll, please?
Mayor Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington, Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake,
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski.
Yes.
I did hear the Vice Mayor's yes
I heard
in
that
there.
too.
Okay, good. So with a vote of 5-0, the Stillwater City Council meeting is now adjourned. At this time, we will move over to the Stillwater Economic Development Authority agenda, and I will call the CETA meeting for May 4th, 2020 to order. On the consent docket tonight, we just have approval of minutes from our April 20 meeting. Is there a motion on the consent docket?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion from the Vice Mayor and a second from Councilor Wedlake to approve the consent docket. Teresa, can you please call the roll?
Chair Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. They'll take us down to items on general orders. Number 5A, approve the approve fiscal year 21 economic development contract extension with the Chamber of Commerce. Mr. McNichol.
Thank you. The report before you describes a one-year extension of the Chamber of Commerce Economic Development Agreement and their annual contract. The contract has reporting requirements. They do those quarterly, and I think, in fact, they're due here in another month or so to update the council. This is at this point I'm lost for words. A strong economic development program here in Stillwater is necessary. I think the Chamber's work on the other side of the house, where they work with existing businesses and try to recruit new retail, is going to be sorely needed over the next few months. We think that they have always met the terms of their contract, and staff would recommend that trustees renew it for the next year.
All right, trustees, questions or comments?
I just want to give a shout out that during this pandemic, I think the Chamber has really stepped up and kept businesses engaged, kept the community together on that side of it. And so I've appreciated their partnership and their efforts to keep businesses hopefully going as much as possible, and also to kind of keep morale among those business owners up. And so I've appreciated what they've done during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really appreciate them stepping up both to help their members and also businesses in town that aren't necessarily members of the Chamber. This is a really rough time for businesses and business owners, and the work of the Chamber and our continued investment in economic development. They have a lot of projects that have been ongoing since before this started that potentially will be very important moving forward for Stillwater as well. So I think it's really important that we do everything we can to continue to invest in the future. We're going to talk about this, I think, on the next agenda item as well, right? It's really important that we don't hunker down too much from an investment standpoint and just focused on the here and now. We've got to keep our eye down the road and say, when we get out of this, we're going to have to be ready to move, and having the chamber, providing those services that they are providing now is going to be important then as well. So, further comments, questions, or a motion on this item?
Motion to approve the FY21 Economic Development Contract Extension Agreement with the Stillwater Chamber of Commerce.
Second.
We have a motion from Trustee Zanatti and a second from Trustee Jaloski. Teresa, can you call the roll, please?
Chair Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanatti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that contract extension is approved. That takes us to item 5B, which is a similar matter on the fiscal year 21 contract for Visit Stillwater. Mr. McNichol?
Well, similar circumstance with the chamber. Visit Stillwater works to bring people to town. They work to bring people to our restaurants, to our retail establishments, and to our hotel and motels here in Stillwater. They are funded through the hotel and motel tax. And Christy and I have had numerous conversations over the last couple of months about where that's going to go. Her crystal ball seems to be working better than mine. And we're a little concerned about the balance next year, but she tells me once things appear to be clear in terms of this virus that we all keep talking about, that she is certain that she can get enough people in here to fund her contract. So again, a very important and necessary action for the city to bring economic development and visitors to town. And she would beat me if I didn't tell you that this is Tourism Week, I believe. And kind of an unfortunate time to have it, but a whole lot of things unfortunate with this virus around. But I'll answer any questions that council might have, or excuse me, trustees may have.
Trustees, anything for Norman at this point?
I don't have an for Norman or for Christy, but I just want to say again, I have appreciated what Visit Stillwater has done during this time. And I think of how much has happened in the last year as far as communications with your board. I see Chris Norris is on too. And so Christy, I've appreciated the additional conversations we've had. And I really think we're all at a good point where between you, the chamber, and the city, we can really move past and figure out what needs to happen so that the city of Stillwater can figure out what this new normal is going to look like and get people back visiting our town and seeing what a great community it is. So I just wanted to give a shout out that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Christy and Chris, we appreciate you both being here. I'd love to hear your comments or question, or if you're just here to answer questions, or if you have something to add at this point. We again appreciate what you've been doing.
Well, I appreciate the work y'all have done with us, and I think we're ready to go. I mean, everyone's cabin fevered. You're well aware of that. But I think we're going to be okay once we get going again and have some promising test results. And we got a great city to sell, and we're ready to get going. And we've already, I think, rescheduled some things that we lost for this summer, for next summer, especially the bike ride that was going to be huge in June. And I think we've made some progress on that. I don't think we have an exact date, but we're ready to go. The board's fired up, and we're ready to get going and do our job.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Christy?
I was really just here for Q&A, but
okay.
Thank you, Norman, for mentioning it is National Travel and Tourism Week. And this year, the theme is the spirit of travel. And it is, obviously more coming from a different perspective that travel and tourism is going to be so critical to recovery for local economies. And it takes everybody to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We're sort of traveling in spirit more than traveling this year. Yeah. Well, we again appreciate what you all have been doing. I know, Christy, your work to try to get restaurant hours and who's delivering and who's picking up, and creating on your website a place for people to go get that information. Just sort of above and beyond. Really, there's not a lot of people coming in from out of town, so providing that that information for our local folks is very helpful. And I know you guys have been working really hard to be planning ahead, like we talked about, with the chamber. I mean, and you said, Chris, I mean, we've got to be ready for when we do have the opportunity to get back on the road and have people in town. So, it's good to have you guys in those positions and ready to go.
Thank you. My team and I put together we're calling it a comeback campaign, and it's going along with the phases as well. And obviously it might transition a little bit in regard to dates, but we definitely feel like we have a great plan in place, and Zoomed and webinared and conference called every single week out the wazoo, I think, but just making sure that we are ahead of what we think is going to happen from a kind of a community, national, and statewide trend, so we can be right there.
Great. That's great. Trustees, any other questions or comments? All right. Is there a motion on this item?
Motion to approve the extension agreement with Visit Stillwater to provide destination marketing and visitor development services.
Second.
I have a motion from Trustee Wedlake and a second from Trustee Zanotti. Teresa, can you please call the roll?
Chair Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that contract extension is renewed. Thanks again, Chris and Christy.
Thanks, guys.
That takes us to the end of this agenda. Are there any reports, Mr. Dorman? Mr. McNichol?
Happy birthday to your son. Enjoy the cake.
Trustees, anything further from you all?
I just want to say, how delicious would it be if you lose the census thing with Norman, but then we come in at over 90% of a responder rate. There's still time, so go out there and do it and just knock it out of the park.
We should do that.
The mayor still has to wear an OU hat. So.
That's not that exciting for me, but I would be more than happy to wear it if we had that number up that high. So I appreciate that. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion from, I think, Vice Chair Darlington and a second from Trustee Jaloski. Teresa, can you call the roll?
Chair Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, CETA is now adjourned. Thank you all for being here tonight. Have a good evening.